At 10:28 p.m. on Monday, India time, U.S. President Donald Trump issued an excitable tweet announcing an India-U.S. trade deal. Taking to Truth Social, Trump claimed that the PM Modi has agreed to stop buying Russian oil and instead New Delhi will buy more oil from U.S. and Venezuela and thereby help end the war in Ukraine. He announced that the U.S. has reduced reciprocal tariffs on India from 50% to 18% and will reduce tariffs and non-tariffs barriers against the U.S. to zero. He also said that India will buy over $500 billion of U.S. energy and products. As expected, India's response was measured. Prime Minister Modi took to X and responded to Trump with a big thank you, confirming that tariffs on India were indeed reduced to 18%. However, Prime Minister Modi did not address any other claims by Trump. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal went on to clear some more air by adding that India's position on protecting the agriculture and dairy sector remains uncompromised. The clarification followed after the leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi today cornered the government over the deal, saying that it was signed under pressure.
इस ट्रेड डील में आपकी मेहनत को, आपके खून पसीने को नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने बेच दिया है और वो इसलिए बेचा है क्योंकि ये कॉम्प्रोमाइज्ड है। सिर्फ आपको नहीं बेचा है, देश को बेचा है।
I can assure 140 crore brothers and sisters that this is a deal that will protect the sensitive sectors, the interests of our agriculture and our dairy sectors in full respect.
Goyal has said that the details of the trade deal will be announced by India and U.S. in a joint statement. Additionally, this is very crucial as well. Kremlin has said that it has not received any communication from New Delhi on completely cutting off oil purchases. Given the factors above, Trump's claim cannot be entirely taken at face value until the joint statement on the deal is issued. Now, if you look at where do we stand, China has a 34% tariff, Vietnam has 20% tariff, Bangladesh has 20% tariff, Thailand has 19% tariff, Indonesia has 19% tariff, Pakistan has 90% tariff, India has 18% tariff. This is why India is being projected as a major winner in the Trump's tariff move. Under the new rates announced by the U.S., China faces tariffs of 34%, Vietnam and Bangladesh are both at 20%, Thailand, Indonesia and Pakistan face tariffs of 19% each. India, meanwhile, has been placed at 18%, as I mentioned. That given India's exporters a clear pricing advantage in the American market, at least one paper compared to regional rival. This is the tariff gap that Washington is using to signal what it calls a strategic shift and what India is now pitching as a trade edge. On this issue, I am joined by Ojal Singh Bhatia, former ambassador to WTO, and Ambassador Veena Sikri, former High Commissioner to Bangladesh. Let me straight away go to Mr. Bhatia. Ambassador Bhatia, your opening comments. Sorry, I was a little late. Big breaking news had taken place and it had to be accommodated. Manipur is finally going to have a chief minister after so much of violence, sir.
No problem. There are various important things to be discussed. But as far as the U.S.-India deal is concerned, of course, we still await more details. And I think matters will be much clearer once the joint statement is issued and once the government makes a statement in Parliament. But as things stand, I think a couple of things are clear. One is that duties on Indian export to the United States have been reduced from 50% to 18%, except for some sectors like steel, aluminium, and automobiles, on which Section 232 tariffs will still apply. Now, this is going to benefit a large number of labor-intensive sectors and a number of MSMEs in various sectors like marine products, textiles and apparel, engineering products, and so on. Now, this is obviously a big gain for India because it had been priced out of the United States market. But even a bigger gain than this is the return of predictability and stability. For a long time, we have been speculating about how things are going to pan out between India and United States, and a number of exports have been held up, A number of investment decisions have been held up. So I think by imparting stability and predictability to the relationship, this deal does a lot in terms, for instance, of foreign direct investment, portfolio investment, in terms of joint ventures, and so on. The other gain I see is in terms of value chains for critical sectors like semiconductors, critical minerals, and so on. And I think to the extent that Indian companies uh, can are enabled to join these value chains, this will be a huge value added for us. So overall, I would say that from whatever is available to us in the public domain, this is a major gain for us. And I think the budget also foreshadowed some of these developments. For instance, the tax break given for foreign cloud companies who are putting up data centers in India, and as well as foreign companies, tax break for foreign companies who are supplying capital equipment to Indian contract manufacturers. So all this adds up to a larger picture of greater integration of Indian companies with their American counterparts, and therefore being able to participate in a more meaningful way.
Uh, Ambassador Sikri, your opening comments before I get into some details, ma'am.
No, I do think that this has indeed been a major development. And I think the very important way is the way in which the Indian government faced all these difficulties over the past few months with strategic restraint. You know, there was a great deal of calmness and a collected approach, a restrained approach. There were no amount, of any kind of unpredictability on the Indian side, except that there was going to be strategic restraint and great balance. But behind the scenes, a great deal of discussions and a great deal of detailed aspects of every sector have gone on. I think that the fact that India was able to be so resilient in increasing its overall exports, even though its exports to USA had gone down, was one big factor that everybody in America started advising President Trump that, look, please do something and agree to the Indian trade deal. We do know that at least on 2 or 3 occasions in the past, this deal had gone right up to President Trump for approval, but it was not approved at that time. That was one thing, that India was able to conclude all these deals with other countries. The India-EU deal, described as the mother of all deals, perhaps the immediate factor for people telling President Trump and advising him. And President Trump's feeling that, look, India is going ahead. FOMO, fear of missing out, became a big factor for President Trump and his administration. In the beginning, people like Peter Navarro and looked like made all kinds of difficult and unwarranted comments about India and about the negotiations on the deal. But now it shows very clearly that India's strategic restraint has paid off. I fully support that this is a great boost to Indian exports in these labor-intensive sectors like ready-made garments, like leather goods, like gems and jewelry, even seafood exports. It would be a great boost. Our steel exports to USA had fallen by 40%. I think this should be a revival there. Some of the generic drugs exports had fallen, so there would be a great revival. But this is a great boost, an overall boost once again for Indian exports, because we had already shown a boost despite the fall in exports to the US in the last several quarters. So I think that we should welcome this deal. I think the figure of $500 billion is still a little bit unknown, whether it refers to the $500 billion of the joint statement of a year ago with the target of doubling of India-U.S. trade to $500 billion by 2030, or whether this is a new figure altogether. This will only be known when we are able to read the finer details. But I think we have to all welcome this, because it gives a great deal of stability to what otherwise could have caused difficulties to all the people involved in the labor-intensive sectors of India's exports. And we have to really, I think, congratulate the government for having brought this about. This is a very, very big thing indeed. And combined with the India-EU FTA, this really is a signal of India's a big boost to India's exports and overall India's continued strong economic growth in the coming quarters.
Let me take quick comment from Deputy Editor Business, Shweta Kothari, who joins me from the studio. Were you surprised by the press conference? It was very much on the political side, Shweta, and the minister said the details will come shortly. You know, the joint statement.
That's right.
So, tell me, do announcements of such business deals take place like this?
You know, not to my understanding, but I think it's not India that jumped the gun, Karthikeya. It was the U.S. president. And it does appear to me right now, with all the details that have emerged, is that Donald Trump was ecstatic about, you know, arriving at a deal. He posted on social media as soon as he could before both the sides, the negotiators, the people who were actually working on the contours of the deal, had time to finalize the deal. So, you know, what has come out of that press conference by commerce ministers, that both sides are still working through the fine prints of the deal, and we only know preliminary details. So here's what we know so far on the basis of what Piyush Goyal has shared with us. He shared that it is a win-win deal. So speculations and conversations that India has given up and opened its agriculture sector, I think those can be put to rest, because Piyush Goyal is making it clear that our sensitive sectors like dairy, agriculture are protected, will continue to remain protected. Number two, no clarity on Russian oil imports. Now, Donald Trump said, very proudly there that India has committed to bringing down its Russian oil imports. Now, it is, I think, but implied right now that India is silent on it. There is stoic silence. If anything, government sources are telling us that Russian oil imports over the course of 1 year have gone down by themselves, and that's strictly to do with market forces. So at one point, we were importing about 1.7 million barrels per day. Today, it's gone down to about 1.3 to 1.2 million barrels, and that's strictly due to the fact that, you know, Russian oil is not as lucrative as it used to be. So India continues to diversify its supply chains, but that's got to do with India's own economic interest, and we will not allow U.S. or any other country for that matter to dictate our foreign policy or dictate how and where we purchase oil or India's energy needs from. That's number two. Number three is about that $500 billion worth of trade deal. Now, we tried working on all the computations and permutations on how that trade deal would be about $5 billion worth. So saying that perhaps that's a longer timeline, that in the course of next 10 to 12 years, we are looking at India-U.S. trade amplifying, doubling, tripling. Currently, it's about 130 to 140 billion dollars, and even if it grows at 7.5% with that CAGR, it's only likely to be about 500 billion dollars in about 10 to 12 years from now. So a lot came by the way of that press conference as far as political messaging is concerned, as you rightly pointed out, but little clarity on what the fine prints or the contours of the deal is. Now, that is only going to come out by the way of a joint statement, if and when it comes.
You stay with me. Ambassador Bhatia, do you think that this time, do you feel that the Americans jumped the gun? It happened yesterday at 10:28, you know. I was about to retire, if I may say so. And then, every hell broke loose. We were all connected to the studio. And then came number of tweets. That is why those details are being awaited, sir?
Well, this is par for the course with President Trump, isn't it?
True.
But I think the fact that he has announced the deal, and that has been corroborated by the Indian side, these are welcome developments. Of course, only when we read the fine print, we will know where the balance in the deal lies. But overall, from whatever is available to us now, I think the relationship, even more than the trade, I think this strategic relationship with the United States is back in operation. And I think the greater integration of American technologies with Indian skills is something we can look forward to. So overall, I would say I'm quite hopeful that this deal will be a very significant development for the Indian economy. And I think Mr. Piyush Goyal has laid to rest the issues of agriculture and dairy. And I think while of course we will still wait for the joint statement, but I think that has assuaged many apprehensions.
Ambassador,
as far as the one point.
Absolutely, sir. Please.
As far as the $500 billion is concerned, I think we have seen similar numbers being floated in the deal with the European Union, in the deal with the United Kingdom, in the deal with Japan and Korea. So let's just keep it as an aspirational figure for the time being.
Okay.
Absolutely. Ambassador Sikri, when the minister said that the joint statement will be issued shortly, what am I supposed to deduce from it? Is it a work in making, or is it just a sort of a process of indexing? How do I break down this statement of the minister, madam, when he says it will be issued shortly?
Well, I think the broad contours of the deal have got to be already finalized. There's no doubt about that, because nobody will announce a deal until the broadest possible contours and a lot of the finer points, except for the pure nitty-gritty, the indexing, as you say, the putting it down into a certain order and format, and how to present the deal, which will be the first, second, third, fourth, and 20th paragraph, and so on. All those take time to clean up the negotiations and to put, and then everybody has to check and recheck that actually what you wanted and what you agreed upon is actually what is there in the text, and there should be no mistake of that. So all those things take time in the concluding of a deal. But when President Trump announced it, and then our Prime Minister has responded, obviously, and then then President Trump spoke to our Prime Minister before that, before announcing it. So clearly there was an understanding at the top level to actually announce the deal, which meant that the negotiations had more or less been completed, except for these nitty-gritty and cleaning up that is always takes some time, and we will soon know about the rest. But I think that these factors of I think India's chairmanship of BRICS this year. This is another very important point that has been taken on board by President Trump, and there would have been discussions on this, on what the chairmanship of BRICS would mean, whether there'll be any further moves for a separate BRICS currency, whether the de-dollarization process, the selling of Indian treasuries. You do know that Ambassador Sergio Gore actually called on the Governor of the Reserve Bank of India in Bombay within the first couple of weeks of his arrival here. So these are important things. But I think another important thing is that, when President Trump wanted all these big IT companies, whether it's Google, Microsoft, Amazon, to invest big in America, but then he announced his H-1B visa problems, and now in 2026 there's not going to be a single H-1B visa issued. The next interview is only in 2027. So the big companies immediately decided to move their investments to India, and they've announced big investments in India. So I think this was also a very big factor, showing that despite their promises to President Trump about investing in the U.S., they knew that they can only carry on in these sectors if they have their, and that links in with what Ambassador Bhatia said about the budget stops for the data centers and these new items that are there.
But Ambassador, I know it's slightly speculative. I never expected it that it will happen like that. I don't want to put two and two together. What's happening in the past?
Just quickly add, I think what's really happened here is that Donald Trump has also buckled under pressure with India-EU deal, with India's chairmanship of BRICS. I think what Ambassador Sikri was pointing out, it feels like there was some sort of pressure tactic playing out there, with India making it clear that we are not going to agree on non-negotiable items in front of us. So you want to deal, you make the first move, and it does look like Trump made the first move, Kartikeya. It wasn't Indian side. We were not prepared to make an announcement.
Is that the point, ma'am, you were trying to make, that Trump buckled under pressure?
No, I think I mentioned FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yeah.
I think that was a big factor, not for Trump, but I think the people all around him,
That's right.
saying again and again and again, you can't do this, you can't leave India out of it. There has to be, this agreement. And we all know that the deal had gone up to President Trump at least 2 or 3 times in recent months, but it was not cleared at his level, and it went back to the negotiating table. Commerce Minister Goyal had always been saying, no, it's very close, it's very close. So obviously there were these 1 or 2 aspects, but I think these 2 or 3 big factors that I have mentioned, and that have really pushed this deal through, and India's resilience in the face of all the difficulties that we faced, and our strategic restraint certainly had a big deal to do with it, because India is not going to be pushed around in these matters. That became very clear.
Right.
And as a result, now we have the pax silica coming on, the critical minerals coming on, and the promise of President Trump coming here in 2 months. 2 weeks ago, when Sergio Gore arrived, or 3 weeks ago, he said, oh, maybe President Trump will come in a year or 2, and now it's down to 2 months. Maybe there'll be a Quad summit in 2 months' time. We don't know, but we are hoping so.
clearly, I mean, there is FOMO playing out here in full scale, especially, these deals, when they're so big, they're also a lot about optics, especially coming a week after the mother of all deals was signed between
Today
India
someone was saying this is
and
father
the
of all
EU.
deals.
This is, they're
So
calling
yeah.
it the father of all deals. But I have to ask a question to Ambassador Bhatia, if you may allow.
Absolutely,
Karthik here.
absolutely.
Ambassador Bhatia, a lot has also been left to imagination here, and I want to pick your brains on two important aspects. When Donald Trump goes out there and writes that India has committed to not purchasing Russian oil, I think that leaves India in a spot to clarify whether that sort of commitment was made or not. That's number one. Number two, agriculture. I mean, everybody would be talking about agriculture today because that remains a major bone of contention for India. It's a sensitive sector, although, Commerce Minister saying we haven't really opened up. So either of them is not being true, and I'm not sure which side is not being true right now. Or is there more to it than meet the eyes? Perhaps some part of agriculture sector has been opened, other remains closed. What are you making of it, sir?
Well, as far as the Russian oil is concerned, I think there is more to diplomatic negotiation than is put down in print. And I think India is reducing purchase of Russian oil. It is diversifying its energy requirements. But to expect India to slam it down cold turkey, I would be very surprised. I think India will gradually reduce Russian oil purchases and diversify, including perhaps in Venezuela, from whom it used to buy earlier. So I don't think this is going to be a binary issue of yes to Russian oil and no to Russian oil. It's going to be somewhere in the middle.
But is it going to sour our relationship with Russia? Because trade deal is one aspect, but we are talking about a very complex interplay of countries with whom we deal.
I think in that kind of diplomatic chessboard, there are many more pawns to move. So I don't think Mr. Putin can take umbrage at just one factor, which is the volume of oil imported by India. There are so many factors to this relationship, which has gone on for more than 70 years. So I don't think there is any issue of a breaking point as far as India-Russia are concerned.
I think Ambassador Sikri wanted to come on that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, the President Putin's visit to India very recently was quite successful, and I'm sure this issue would have been discussed, but that time we were in the middle of all this pressure from America about, stopping Russian purchases of oil. And also, people were saying, some of President Trump's advisors, that India is contributing to the Ukraine war, and so it was really a moment of high pressure. I'm sure this would have been sorted out with President Putin. And indeed, there are so many other very detailed defense deals and security deals under negotiation with Russia, which will surely be announced in the near future, that this particular aspect of oil and the amount of oil and when to cut down is not going to be a breaking point in any manner at all with Russia, not at all.
No, not a breaking point. But Ambassador Sikri, apart from the apprehensions which the country had on the issue of agriculture and poultry, Trump mentioned one thing, 0% tariff, A lot of people are talking about it. But, I mean, it's just a rhetoric, or does he really mean 0%?
If I come in there, I think that's also raising a lot of questions on whether this is a fair deal. Remember, an 18% tariff looks very little when you compare it to a 50% tariff, but it looks a lot when you compare it to a 0% tariff, which is what Indian goods were taxed at, right? So from a 0 to an 18% reciprocal tariff with 25% penalty now out of the way is still a lot. That's number one. Number two, 0% tariff for U.S. goods. I think that's too good to be true.
So Ambassador, what's your assessment? Is he talking about goods or is he talking about sectors?
No, I think that this whole question of 0% tariff will be clarified when the details come out. But if you look at the pattern of America's FTA that it's already concluded with other countries and how he's imposed this extra tariff. Let's take Canada, for example.
Okay.
I mean, they've had a long-term, very close relationship and an FTA to boot and everything, and the multilateral FTA, everything. But still, with the tariffs were imposed by America on Canadian imports. And even though the Canadians wanted to impose counter tariffs, that too fell through because of the pressure. So it's a very complex situation whether we will have 100% zero tariff on all American imports. I think we have to wait for the fine print. But looks very, very doubtful indeed. I think the percentage of average tariffs on American goods will certainly go down substantially, but whether it will go down to zero, I'm not so sure.
Ambassador Bhatia, do you think that we have been able to shield, safe our MSMEs, apparel, textile sectors, which has been the real main concerns apart from fisheries, that was really, I would say, badly affected in a couple of months?
Well, many of these labor-intensive sectors are very cost sensitive, and the punitive tariff that were imposed on India, 50% against, let us say, 19 or 20% enjoyed by our Asian competitors, effectively ruled out Indian exporters from the U.S. market. So to the extent that we have now got parity and more in terms of tariffs, I think this is a major boon for our labor-intensive sectors. So, but let me just add one more point, which is that like the European Union, the United States is not a competitor to Indian industry in most sectors. They are a technology power, and their products are technology plus products usually. So to the extent that we provide much more liberalized access to them, it does not really hurt Indian industry very much. On the other hand, to the extent that it helps in integration of value chains between India and the United States,
Okay.
I think it is a plus for both sides.
Okay, I really have to thank all of you.